Welcome back into the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, part number 2 with our two-hole hitter here, Matt Josephs from sportsmemo.com, at midmajor Matt on Twitter. Matt, welcome in, bud. How you feeling?
Feeling good. Crazy. I think we're already 3 weeks into the college football season, but looking forward to discussing some of the slate.
Absolutely, guys. If you're new to the College Football Every Game on the Board podcast, it's in the name. We talk every single game. If you go to the odds screen, those little numbers next to the team name, we are going down in numerical order. Just had Jeff Nadeau with part number 1. We got part number 2 here with mid-major Matt in this section, 133, 134, UMass, Eastern Michigan, all the way down to 167, 168, Tulane in Southern Miss. He's a good guy to talk these games because I believe in almost all of them we got non-Power 5 teams. So not all of them, but almost all of them. So this should be a good section here. Kicking us off, 2 o'clock Eastern time, Matt. We get UMass at Eastern Michigan. The MAC team, Eastern Michigan, laying 8 at home, 52.5 being the total. See that it opened at 10. So we have seen some Minutemen money. And I think this UMass team has improved. Now, throwing the ball down the field and scoring that type of offense, not so much. But they got athletes more than UMass teams in the past, in my opinion. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, certainly. Eastern Michigan's a better team to play as an underdog. I am not a fan of playing them as a favorite because, as we've talked about, because I feel like I've had Eastern Michigan games like every time we've done this. Eastern Michigan, every game is a one-score game, it feels like, at least when they're winning and when they're losing. I mean, obviously, the Minnesota game was close. It was scoreless at the end of the first quarter. So first quarter unders continue to be profitable in the Minnesota game. And Eastern Michigan's defense hung tough. Obviously, Minnesota moved the ball a little bit, and there were some things that worked in Eastern Michigan's favor. But that's why they're better as an underdog, because their offense is unreliable at times. Their defense isn't great, but does what it has to. And now you've got a UMass team that, look, I'm not a fan of UMass as much without their number 1 quarterback, but obviously last game they went to their number 3 quarterback at some point because Carlos Davis got hurt. It looks like Carlos Davis is going to play in this game. It's a little frustrating that we don't see the number 1 QB because he was one of the reasons why you back this team. But to me, if I was playing this game, it would certainly only be UMass here. Eastern Michigan is a better underdog team. We've given out the statistics before. Chris Creighton as an underdog is tremendous against the spread. Not so much as a favorite. It doesn't happen as much for the Eagles, but if I was to play this game, it would be UMass or pass.
Next game up, we got Bowling Green at Michigan as the MAC team travels to the Big House. Always kind of a tricky handicap, Matt, and sure enough, it's in the point spread, minus 40.5. That's Michigan at home. It is a night game, 7:30 Eastern. So we got to lay 40 with a total of 54 if you want Michigan, or maybe you're leaning with the dog. What are we thinking here with Eastern or with Bowling Green versus Michigan?
As we talked about last week, I hate these name your score kind of games. The one thing that I think if you were to look at the over here, Michigan's due to kind of explode offensively. They were kind of underwhelming in that first game. They won 35-7 against UNLV, but the run game continues to be a disappointment. I think there were some people who thought Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards could be sneaky Heisman guys, and neither of them have really gotten off so far this season. So this could be the opportunity. Obviously, it's the last non-conference game before they play Rutgers at home. And Bowling Green's defense hasn't exactly been great. But one of these situations, Drew, where I'm not trying to guess how much Michigan wants to run the score up. Harbaugh's not there. This is the final game he's suspended for this season. So I expect Michigan to try and pound the ball on the ground as much as possible. But if they continue to struggle, they'll just keep throwing it. They have no problem doing that with J.J. McCarthy. But eventually they have to get their run game going. Maybe it happens on Saturday.
Next game up, we got the Rio Grande rivalry. We love our rivalry names on this podcast. Also, guys, if you're a long-time listener, first-time listener, if I ever forget one, please comment below and let me know there is a named rivalry. And the next one up, the Rio Grande rivalry here, 8 o'clock Eastern. I believe that's 6 o'clock local time. It's New Mexico State and New Mexico, 53.5 being the total. Competitively priced game here, Matt. It is New Mexico as the home, -1, -1.5 point favorite, 53.5 being the total.
Yeah, this one's a tough one. Obviously, New Mexico did not look good in their FBS game, and then they looked really good in their FCS game. So we don't know
Mhm.
exactly what to expect. Last year in this game, New Mexico State won 21-9. Of course, New Mexico all of a sudden got some weapons on offense, decided to change their whole offensive system. They brought in the UAB quarterback and everything. So I expect New Mexico to play better here. Obviously, as you said, it's a very competitively priced game. New Mexico State has just been kind of a disappointment so far this season for the most part. I mean, they lost to Liberty. Granted, that was a huge revenge spot for Liberty here. I would slightly lean to the home team here, Drew, but it's not a game I love. I mean, once again, as we always talk about in the show, we'll give you a preview for every game. We'll give you thoughts on every game, but the key is they have to put the lines out for every game. We don't have to play every game unless you love either one of these sides. I mean, I think New Mexico's the slight lean here only because they're home, but this is a game that you just kind of pass on the board and play and put more on something else that you like instead.
Sure. I mean, as sports bettors, we really only have two advantages. It's what to bet and how much to bet. Those are kind of the two edges you have on the sports book. And like you said, they have to put out numbers on all of these games. I like New Mexico State, and that's coming from a guy that just lost. I bet him against Liberty. And Jerry Kill's team went to a bowl game last year. They returned a lot. At some point, I think they're going to start winning some games. I mean, New Mexico State going bowling and being able to carry that over. I'm looking to bet on them, and I haven't gotten down yet, though, guys. We got CMU and Notre Dame. Another one of these kind of maybe name your scores is the Chippewas head to South Bend. Notre Dame has looked good out the gate, Matt. They really have. That offensive line looks good. Sam Hartman, in my opinion, arguably the one of the best college quarterbacks. Great beard as well. Irish laying 34.5, 52.5 being the total.
And don't forget the rib necklace too, Drew. I mean, obviously that's
Oh
another
yeah.
story involving Hartman as the quarterback. I mean, yeah, you mentioned it. This is another name your own score kind of game. And the other thing that kind of complicates things a little bit. Oh yeah, Ohio State's next week for Notre Dame. So I can't
Good
imagine that the
point.
starters are going to play that much. So maybe you look at a first quarter, a first half, you see Notre Dame start fast. Central Michigan nearly lost their FCS game last week, 45-42 to New Hampshire. CMU has a modestly decent offense. Bert Emanuel Jr., he's got some mobility at quarterback, and it's not bad. Maybe they add to a total here if Notre Dame takes their starters out on defense here. But once again, any sort of thing involving Notre Dame here, you probably want to play it first quarter, first half. You don't know how long these starters are going to be in there with a rather large game next week.
At Mid Major Matt on Twitter. You can listen to his radio show, ESPN Richmond, and he follows the Virginia schools. Obviously, it's his day job, if you will, to interview a lot of these coaches. He knows the programs very well. And the next one up, it's the Virginia Tech Hokies going on the road to Rutgers. So we get an ACC Big Ten matchup here with the Scarlet Knights laying 7, Matt, with a low total. We're going sub 40 here, 39.5 being the total. Virginia Tech at Rutgers, 3:30 Eastern.
Yeah, one of the easiest wins I had this season was, obviously the season's only 3 weeks old, but I took the team total under for Temple last week. It was 17.5. They obviously couldn't do very much. They only scored 7 in the 36-7 Rutgers win. And I'll be certainly interested. And once again, I don't know if it's out yet on DraftKings. Caesars also has team totals, but I'll be looking at the Tech team total under here. Ollie Jennings, we talked about it last week or whatever week it was. Virginia Tech's offense looks so much different with Ollie Jennings because they have a legit number 1 wide receiver. He is out for this week. Jalen Lane, the number 1 that came over from Middle Tennessee, who's now number 2, he's questionable for this game. Grant Wells is questionable for this game. I'm looking at a team total under here for Tech without their number 1 and potentially their number 2 wide receivers and their backup quarterback. They haven't been able to run the ball this year. They struggled to run it against Purdue. Now, you kind of throw out a lot of this stuff from last week, Drew, because last week Tech had a 5.5-hour weather delay. Now, some people will counter that by saying they scored 17 points. They tied the game up going into halftime, and then eventually they lost. Yeah, but I mean, it kind of messed up the flow of the whole game, being able to sit for 5.5 hours. So I kind of throw some of this stuff out from last week. I'm looking at a Virginia Tech team total, especially if it's 16.5 or lower, 16.5, 14.5 in that general area. If you get a 17.5, shove in. I think that's going to be a great bet. But 14.5 to 16.5, I would love to get and take the under for the Hokies. They're going to struggle to score in this one.
And I mean, I'm just doing the top of my head math here. If the total's 40 and the spread is 7, that would make it right around 17, right? For their team total, maybe 16 and a half. Is that normally, you bet team totals more than me. Can you do that? Is that how they post the team totals exactly? Just, minusing the spread of the exact score of what it would be? Or do they actually shade one way or the other on the totals?
I think the key is that they stay away from key numbers. Obviously the key numbers 14 and a half, 17 and a half, 7 and a half, 10 and a half. Like they try to kind of, I'm guessing, because obviously I'm not in their heads. They're trying not to have those key numbers for certain teams. Like I'm guessing if it is, it's going to be Tech 16 and a half. Because most people would want the 17 and a half for the extra field goal. They're going to sit there and say, well, you're not going to get that. You're going to get 16 and a half. And I still would probably take it. I think Tech struggles to score in this one. Rutgers' defense is pretty good. Their secondary is their weakest part, but like their front seven is good enough that they'll get a lot of pressure here. And Kyron Drones is interesting. I think obviously the Baylor transfer coming over, if he does play for Grant Wells, I think he could provide a different kind of thing that Wells can't. But like, that's why I'm saying 16 and a half, 15 and a half, 14 and a half, maybe I'd be very interested. Certainly 17 and a half. Like, I like that one a lot.
Next game up might be right up your alley here. A little degenerate special feel. FIU versus UConn. Huskies -7 at home in stores. 39 and a half being the total. We get the Golden Panthers traveling up north. I don't like that. UConn -7. What are we thinking?
So the one game, I mean, I had a good week. I had 6-2 week last week, but the one game that I was kicking myself, I really like the over in that FIU game. And I think overs in North Texas games are going to be pretty nice all season. North Texas is like one of the worst defenses, but has a pretty good offense to kind of do their own contribution here. I mean, any team that gives up 46 to FIU, like you have to have your head examined because FIU's offense traditionally is pretty poor. They went to their backup quarterback in that one. I kind of, last year UConn won this game 33-12. Obviously for UConn, their starting quarterback, the main transfer, is out for the season. Taquan Roberson, who obviously played last year. And I believe, Drew, he was the guy who got hurt in the first game that led to the Zion Turner kid coming in as their quarterback. So remember, Roberson was pretty good in that game until he got injured. I think UConn's offense will perk up a little bit. Taquan Roberson will add more of a mobility factor than the main transfer will here, Drew. I think that UConn's defense is embarrassed by what they did in that 35-14 loss to Georgia State. I would once again look at a team total under for FIU here. Certainly, if you get those key numbers we just talked about, I think UConn's defense shows up large in this one, and I think UConn can win this game. And once again, we've discussed this. Some people disagree, but like, I don't think this is a bad tease piece, Drew. Tease it down 6 point, 7 point teaser. Essentially, you're asking a bad UConn offense to cover above a touchdown here or around a touchdown. So why not make it easier for them to cover and tease it down a little bit?
That's good info there. UConn, their quarterback transferred from Maine with the OC, and he threw for a bunch of yards at the FCS level right out the gate. They had trouble moving the ball against NC State, but you're right. Their backup quarterback, I believe he's a Penn State transfer, a kind of highly recruited kid. It might not be that far of a drop-off because he brings the mobility factor.
Right. But and also, obviously, look, they won this game 33-12 on the road, so they can cover large numbers. But like, we know what UConn is. They want to run the ball. They want Rosa to run the ball and the rest of their backs. So like, they want to shrink the game down. So I don't like asking them to cover more than a touchdown. They're going to win this game. As we said, Roberson's not some guy who's never been with this team. He probably practiced a lot. They probably get him a bunch of reps. So I think UConn's offense will perform pretty decent, but I hate asking him to cover around a touchdown here. So that's why I'm saying bring that number down a little bit.
At Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Check out his work, sportsmemo.com, 6-2 week last week, and his ESPN Richmond radio show. Guys, we are brought to you by Viva Tequila Seltzer. If you go to vivatequilaseltzer.com, you can get it shipped to your house. Viva Tequila Seltzer, refreshing and drinkable hard seltzer, 88 calories, 0 carbs, 0 sugar, 4.5% ABV. Viva, the perfect drink for your pregame celebrations, as it was created with the active lifestyle in mind. We get Alabama and South Florida up next, and we get the SEC team going on the road, kind of a unique travel spot here within Raymond James. Alabama laying 32, of course, off the loss to Texas. Maybe they take it out here on the Bulls. 60.5 being the total. So, yeah, Crimson Tide minus 32, 60.5 the total in Raymond James.
So by the way, last week on the show at the end, when we did our little FCS notes, I literally pointed out how this was a look ahead for USF, and Florida A&M covered that game because USF only won 38-24. So hopefully somebody was listening to that. USF was like a 24-ish point favorite, I think, at the time. So obviously the FCS team covered. And why wouldn't they be looking ahead? Alabama is coming to Tampa. Like, this is incredible. Drew, here's a stat for you. First road trip for Alabama out to a non-Power 5 school since 1992. That's the last time they made a road trip to a non-Power 5 school. Now, look, USF is not going to win this game. They may not score very much here. But so here's the question, Drew, and obviously you're more the SEC guy than I am. Like, if I wanted to play the over, is this Alabama offense capable of scoring 50-something points here? Like, I think USF can put a touchdown. I don't think they're getting shut out. In the past, Drew, we've seen like the Bryce Young teams. We've seen the McElroy teams and the teams in the past. Like, they could score and score and score. Do we know yet if Alabama's capable of putting out 50-something points in this situation?
I think they can. I mean, especially if they're able to. Against the better defenses, I would have my questions. But I mean, if they get Milroe going and they're going to have the athlete advantage. I'm not of the camp. Like, Saban used to be the guy that would just sit on the ball, and so like laying big numbers with him, I would really pump the brakes. It's not always like that anymore, though. I mean, they'll keep going. Man, this isn't one that I bet, though, personally, Matt.
No, I as we've talked about, and some people think I'm crazy, but this is just the way I am. I don't even lay 10 points on the road, Drew. I'm certainly not going to lay that many points on the road. Alabama should win. If you think, the question here is, if you think Alabama can carry most of this total, you're taking the Alabama team total over, because it's going to be in the 40s, the 50s, mid 50s, whatever it is. Like, don't take the over in this game, because you're just going to sit there and say, well, wait, I need USF. The only thing USF will bring here, Drew, is USF is quick. So their 3 and outs could be quick. Or if they break a play, they're going to be quick, and maybe they'll get like a 40-yard touchdown, a 50-yard touchdown. So that's kind of the thing you have to consider here, is how angry is Alabama? Also, don't forget the weather. There's a chance of rain, I believe, Saturday. So that certainly will change things for this game. But if you're playing this game and you're thinking about the over, just play the Alabama team total over, because they'll carry most of that total anyway.
Sure. Yeah, good point. In the 1992 set, I believe that's like when the modern SEC, I believe 92 was the first SEC championship game. So they've gone the whole ride here in the modern SEC without traveling to a non-Power 5 until Saturday at South Florida. Next game up, right in your neck of the woods. Well, somewhat, I guess. East Carolina, App State up next. Boone, North Carolina, showing App State laying 9.5 off of that big game. 49.5 being the total. ECU at App State.
So there's a lot of things to consider here. First off, I love that the North Carolina schools have started to play each other, even though Mac Brown, after the App State game, said, I'm done playing App State. Like, yeah. NC State can play them. The rest of the schools can play them. We're not playing them anymore, which I think is terrible, but whatever. That's kind of where we are in college football. You're going to schedule wins instead of schedule in-state rivals and things like that. But App State, obviously, a 2 overtime loss to North Carolina. They probably could have won the game. They probably should have won the game. They got lucky to get to overtime because North Carolina missed that field goal at the buzzer. Where's App State's head at? This is not a good App State team like they have been in the past. They, the new quarterback, Aguilar, they're breaking in new pieces. Their defense is not as stiff as it's been in the past. But you look at this East Carolina team, Drew, and coming off of their game against Marshall last week, like, they have a quarterback problem. Mason Garcia is not good enough. Mason Garcia, I believe, was also their leading rusher last week. So I don't know what East Carolina can do here. There's a lot of teams, Drew, that if they were replacing East Carolina, I'd certainly take the underdog. But I don't trust the Pirates here in this situation. So this is a pass for me, because where's App State's head at? And can East Carolina score enough to cover this number? Those are the two questions I have entering this game.
Couple Power 5 matchups up next here, guys. 149, 150 as we're making our way down in rotation order. 3:30 Eastern, Minnesota at North Carolina. We're seeing UNC minus 7.5 point home favorites, 50 the total in Chapel Hill.
So one of the most profitable things, as I just said, was Minnesota first quarter unders, because they've been scoreless in both first quarters so far. The Minnesota-Nebraska game, the Minnesota Eastern Michigan game last week. Last year, they had only scored like 60-something points in the first quarters, and they held their opponents to like 40 points. So like that was one of the most profitable things. Problem is that the number's 9.5, or at least that's what it was on DraftKings. Maybe there's a 10 out there, depending upon what book you use. I'd be interested in a 10, probably not a 9.5, because you look at this North Carolina team, and here's the weird thing, Drew. Through 2 games, it's been their ground game. Like their ground game and their defense has been what's done it for them. The Hampton kid has been very good. Drake May was not good once again last week, and I think you can kind of say goodbye to his Heisman chances right now because, 2 bad games so far this season. They do have Pittsburgh on the road up next, the start of their conference game. And then you look at Minnesota. Minnesota's got a great wide receiving core, but the kid at quarterback just hasn't been able to get them the ball. Corey Crooms was really good that first week. The second week, he wasn't as good against Eastern Michigan. They only win that game 25-6. I had the team total under for Minnesota in that game, and it won. Listen, Minnesota's defense is good. I think there's a chance, Drew. I kind of like Minnesota a little bit. I think their offense is waiting to explode, but I don't love how PJ Fleck or whoever his offensive coordinator is calling things. You could also say the same about North Carolina's offense, that like Drake May is due to explode and like they're due to like be like they were in the past, but maybe it's just not going to happen as much because their wide receiving core is so different. Small lean to Minnesota here on the road here, Drew. I think Minnesota's offense is getting close to breaking out, and I trust Minnesota's defense more in this situation than I do North Carolina.
Next game up, we got Big Ten and ACC, a high IQ game here, Matt. Northwestern at Duke. Man, Duke is getting some respect in the betting markets, and with good reason. They've looked good out the gate, laying 18.5 here. They are the home team, 48.5 being the total. So laying, nearly 20 points and hosting a Big Ten team. Are they worthy of this price tag?
So as we've kind of done so far this podcast, the one thing you have to look at when you get to this situation is there are some conference games that are coming up, and that presents look-ahead situations. For Duke, it's a trip to UConn, so there is no look-ahead because obviously that first week they played Clemson, so they got their first conference game in there. Duke looked good against Lafayette. Duke's offense is pretty good. Northwestern's feeling good after that win over UTEP, but like now we're kind of getting back to a team that's not very good here in terms of, Northwestern. Northwestern's not a good football team, and they're playing an FBS opponent that is pretty good when it comes to Duke here. But as you just said, Drew, I'm not ready to lay that many points with Duke at all. Northwestern wasn't good last year, and Duke won 31-23 with a lot of the same starters. Not that I think it's going to be that close, but I'm not ready to trust Duke laying that many points, and I'm certainly not going to take the points with Northwestern, who may only score 7, 10, 13 in this contest.
Yeah, Duke's in a whole different price range here, guys. But their quarterback's good. I know you saw him play, and Northwestern, beating UTEP. That's a team I know you know. It's Sun City. He's a listener here, a VIP guy. He's always commenting in. Appreciate you, Sun City. I don't know. I think UTEP might actually be like a little bit of a buy low going forward, Matt. Not sure if you have any like quick thoughts on that. I know it's not one of the games.
I mean, obviously, Gavin Hardison is a solid quarterback, but like their defense isn't good enough. That's the thing. I think there's a buy in terms of taking overs. I think their offense can wake up. Hankins obviously is a pretty good running back, so they do have a solid duo, and they got a pretty good number one wide receiver. But their defense is going to be an issue in any sort of shootouts.
Matt Joseph's here. It's the Every Game on the Board podcast, guys. Going down in rotation order wherever you're downloading your podcasts at. Just search Every Game on the Board if you like the podcast form. We got Facebook going, YouTube as well, on Twitter at MidMajorMatt, at Drew Martin Betts. So yeah, guys, just be searching Every Game on the Board. Love if you guys could rate it. Any comments, feel free to chime in here as we move down the list. Western Michigan and Iowa, Matt. So we get a MAC at a Big Ten school, 42.5 being the total, laying more than 4 touchdowns. That's the Hawkeyes. I'm seeing minus 28 in the hook at most sports books.
So I think, and I'm still decided, this hasn't been a client play yet or anything like that, Drew, but I think I might look at the over. And I know what everybody's saying. Iowa overs? Like, are you serious? Remember, Kirk Ferentz, not Kirk Ferentz. What's his son's name? The offensive coordinator. The
Yeah,
offensive coordinator.
Coach Ferentz. Yeah.
Yeah, Coach Ferentz has a number he has to hit when it comes to scoring points, or else he's gone. And they haven't hit it yet, so they're behind the average so far. We saw with Western Michigan last week in that game against Syracuse, my alma mater, 2-0, that they're going to go fast. And by going fast, it's going to give us a lot of opportunities. Iowa's not going fast. They never will go fast, I think. It'll be 20-72, and Iowa will still huddle. They'll still hand the ball off. They'll still go really slow. But I think Western Michigan's going to give us enough possessions here that I think I like the over, Drew. I think this is the game. And obviously, look, they play at Penn State next week, so they're going to want to take their starters out because that's a game next week that's more important. Maybe that gives us an opportunity to get a Western Michigan touchdown late if their starters are out in the third or fourth quarter. But I think, Drew, this is the game that Iowa cracks 30. And I feel like, and as I said, it's not a client play yet, and I'm hoping it comes down a little bit. Maybe it goes below that key number here. But my lean is to the over. And next week, all of you on this podcast who watch this, who enjoy the show, or who hate watch me, whatever, can remind me of me saying this and be like, you're an idiot for taking an over in an Iowa game. But I think there's some opportunities here, Drew. Western Michigan's going to go 3 and out quick, and their defense isn't good enough. I lean right now to the over.
Sure. I mean, you see some of these teams that just keep the ball on the ground. You got to remember if the defense doesn't stop it and you're getting 10 yards a carry, I mean, 42.5 in a college football game, you can get there. So, hey, I see the profile in ways it could work, but at the same time, this could be 17-0 at the end of the game and be one of those tough losses like you kind of were alluding to. But next game up, we got San Diego State and Oregon State, 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 local time here. We got the 49 being the total, minus 24.5. That's Oregon State as the home favorite. DJU making the change from Clemson to Oregon State. This offenses look good. They are taking a step up in class in terms of the defense that they're facing. I think San Diego State defensively is better than the first two games that Oregon State has played, a FCS team and San Jose State, but still 24.5, 49 being the total. Anything here with the Aztecs and Beavers?
So, I mean, San Diego State's playing their second Pac-12 opponent in a row. They're coming off the 35-10 loss to UCLA. They've got Boise State on Friday night. Not that San Diego State's going to be looking ahead because obviously they can't afford to. They need wins to become bowl eligible. But I mean, I'm so happy for DJU. I thought he got a raw deal in Clemson. Like, I thought they essentially pushed him out of the door because they wanted Cade Klubnik to be the starter. I like DJU. I've always liked DJU. I'm really happy for him. They start conference play next week. I think Oregon State can score a lot of points here. I think Oregon State's team total over could come into play here, Drew. I think their offense is really good now that they have a legitimate quarterback. Not saying the Branson kid from last year wasn't legitimate, but DJU is way better. So I think Oregon State wins this game. I think they win it rather easily. I wouldn't take them as a favorite, though, because they've got conference play next week. Maybe they start sitting some guys, but Oregon State should win this game rather easily.
We got the 3:30 SEC game here, the first one of the season. It's South Carolina at Georgia. 54.5 being the total, minus 27.5. That's the Bulldogs laying nearly 4 touchdowns in between the hedges.
So that's some respect, and obviously you're the SEC guy, so I want your opinion here. But like, that's some respect in terms of the total and the spread for South Carolina. They're assuming South Carolina is going to score some points in this game, and obviously Spencer Rattler and Juice Wells, like, that's a solid combination. Georgia's defense has been really good. Of course, they haven't really been tested so far this season, Drew. I'm wondering what you think in terms of like a South Carolina team total under, if it's like 17.5. I'm guessing it won't be 17.5, but like whatever that number is, like, I can't imagine South Carolina is going to score a lot here. Do you think the total is only high because they think Georgia's going to score a lot of points here? What's your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of in the point spread as well, 4 touchdowns. So that's what Georgia's having to lay right now. I'm with you. I think Georgia has a chance to run it up. There has been years in the past, though, South Carolina like hangs with them. I believe even beat them, a couple of years ago went in there. So I don't know if there's something to that year over year, but I could see Georgia running it up. South Carolina hasn't looked all that great out the gate. I haven't touched this game as of yet, Matt, but we do get South Alabama and Oklahoma State next game up here, 159-160, 7 o'clock Eastern, 47.5 being the total. We're seeing the Cowboys -7 as the home favorite. We've seen money come in on USA. This is a good South Alabama team. I know they lost to Tulane, but they might be able to give Oklahoma State some problems. At least that's what the market is telling us.
Yeah, I'm a little gun shy after the Tulane game. This is a good South Alabama team, and a lot of players are back. And Oklahoma State has their conference opener next week. It's not like Oklahoma State has been that good either. When you look at what's going on here, and the thing I don't like about the Cowboys, and obviously it doesn't really matter right now, it's because Oklahoma State's still playing three quarterbacks. And when you have three quarterbacks, you have none. And, they are perfectly fine with continuing to play these three guys. And so far, it's kind of worked. But at some point, I wonder if playing three quarterbacks hurts the momentum of the offense and everything. I normally would love South Alabama, especially around a touchdown underdog here. But as I said, I'm a little scared after being so boastful about how they were going to do against Tulane here. I think they're live, Drew. I think that their talent is good enough to win this game, but they already failed in a situation like this. So I'm a little worried to kind of play it again. Their defense isn't great. But yeah, I'm always concerned. Three quarterbacks, Drew, we're week 3 into the season, and they're perfectly fine with continuing to play these three quarterbacks.
Matt, next game up, we got an intriguing in-state big brother traveling to the little brother type feel here with Oklahoma at Tulsa. Of course, Tulsa, Oklahoma, 60 being the total, -27, -28. I'm seeing the Sooners as the road favorite. I don't know, tricky handicap here. You liking anything?
So I did a video on this on the YouTube Wager Talk channel on Monday, and doing a little bit more research. I like the over in that game. For Tulsa, we don't know who their quarterback's going to be. Cardell Williams was the second string guy. He got hurt last week. The third string, Roman Fuller, came in, and he was all right. There's still Braylon Braxton, the quarterback from Tulsa. And a little disappointed. Obviously, last week we gave out the over as our best bet in the Washington game. Washington did their part. Tulsa did not. Tulsa left some points on the board, which would have kept Washington scoring late. Obviously, it didn't work out. But, look, Oklahoma coming off a 28-11 win over SMU. Dylan Gabriel is capable of scoring a lot, and Tulsa's defense is certainly not very good here. I'd almost look at, and now we're going to dip into the player props here, Drew. I almost would look at a Dylan Gabriel, and they're not out yet. Dylan Gabriel, maybe over 2.5 or 3.5 passing touchdowns. I think after last week where he was good, he had 4. I think they're going to want to keep him going and get the rest of the team going a little bit. I might look at a Dylan Gabriel touchdown passes over prop when it comes out on Friday night or Saturday.
Player props Friday night, is that when they're normally coming out? I'm seeing FCS come out on Saturday morning sometimes. This is getting late.
Drew, you're speaking my language here. Yes, it's getting very late. Obviously, we have a game tomorrow with the Miami Bethune-Cookman game. I would have liked to have had it out already, and it hasn't come out yet. So, yes, things are kind of frustrating. And if your state doesn't allow you to bet some of this stuff, I can't bet on college player props here. So some states will not be allowed to do it. But Friday night, Saturday, most likely. There may be some out now, but I'm most likely closer to kickoff because the books hate getting beaten these sort of things.
Western Kentucky, Ohio State up next, 4 o'clock Eastern in the Horseshoe. 64 being the total, and we're seeing Ohio State laying 28.5 at home. I mean, if Western Kentucky can score a bit, that's a big number. What are we thinking here? Hilltoppers, the Buckeyes.
Well, it's the other half of that large game next week, Notre Dame and Ohio State. So certainly Ohio State, once again, will be looking to kind of play the first half and get everybody out. But here's the thing. When you look at this game, Western Kentucky, as you mentioned, their offense is good enough to score some touchdowns mid-game and late in the game when maybe there's some backups in there. You know that they're going to want to keep getting some points potentially late in Western Kentucky with Austin Reed as their quarterback. They scored 52 last week. Of course, that was Houston Christian. I kind of lean to the over here, Drew. Kyle McCord was named the starting quarterback for the rest of the year. It doesn't mean the kid that's the backup isn't going to play in this game, because if they're up large enough, they're going to want to play him. But it's nice that there's some continuity here at quarterback. I think this is the opportunity because, once again, Ohio State hasn't really broken out as an offense. They were very disappointing in Indiana. They only scored 35 on an FCS opponent, so maybe this is the kind of game where it's 50-22, 47-17, around there. So if I was to play anything here, Drew, it would be the over more than taking Ohio State as a favorite, because once again, you're asking backups to cover that spread for you, because they're not going to play these guys the whole game with Notre Dame up next.
And you brought up Miami Bethune-Cookman, that Miami Texas A&M game. Miami looking pretty good, and sure enough, Texas A&M next game up hosting ULM. That's Louisiana Monroe. The Warhawks traveling to College Station. A&M laying 36.5, 53.5 being the total in the home of the 12th man.
This is one of those where you're probably looking Texas A&M team total over more than game over. ULM's offense, I don't know how much they're going to carry here. They scored 24 on Lamar last week. It was a 24-14 game. A&M has Auburn up next, aka the start of their conference schedule. So you know that they're going to want to get guys out early. So maybe even, and some books offer this, Drew, first half team total over. Certainly a situation where the Aggies want to get in. They want to do their business. They want to get out, get ready for the SEC opener here. As we talked about last week, and some people liked that I mentioned this, make sure to research head coaches in this situation. Some coaches love running that score up. Whether Jimbo's that kind of guy, I don't know. And certainly coming off a loss to Miami, you think that they want to kind of keep the offense in there a while. But make sure to do some research on the head coaches to see how they handle these extreme situations. Maybe there's some guys who close the playbook a little bit and just run, 8 or 9 plays just to kind of get themselves through the game a little bit. But look at the research on Jimbo Fisher and see what kind of guy he is in this situation. But instead of taking maybe the game over, look at a first half team total over for Texas A&M, who wants to just do their business and get ready for the SEC.
And we have seen the market push this up. It opened 32, and I'm seeing, it's always tough to go off of percentages here, guys, but 90% of the money on Texas A&M. We've seen a 4.5 point move from minus 32 point home favorites to minus 36.5. So Matt, last game up, we'll get some final thoughts, FCS look as well, but we get Tulane at Southern Miss. It's kind of like a regional rivalry game here. Minus 13. That's the Green Wave and Willie Fritz laying as the road favorite. 49.5 being the total in Hattiesburg, Mississippi.
A lot of things to consider here when you look at angles for this game. Southern Miss went to Tulane last year and won 27-24. So Tulane's going to be ready for this game. Problem is they just came off of a 37-20 contest at home against Ole Miss, a rare situation for them to get an SEC school in their building. We don't know about Michael Pratt. The coach said, and I don't know how much he's telling the truth here, Thursday or Friday. Well, we're doing this on Wednesday. Thursday or Friday, we find out if Michael Pratt's going to play. The Horton kid wasn't bad for Tulane. It's just he wasn't good enough, and the defense wasn't good enough. You look at Southern Miss, they were embarrassed by Florida State. The offense has been just miserable so far this season, but they're home against a team they know they can beat. I just wonder, obviously Tulane, I think, is going to win this game. Once again, it's a lot of points. I personally don't lay that many points on the road with anybody, even if I'm 100% sure they're going to win the game. But certainly considering the fact that Southern Miss won at Tulane last year and Tulane coming off an SEC game at home, like there's some situations here I don't love when it comes to this contest.
Matt, that does it for all the games we were slated to talk here. And guys, we'll be in with Rob Vino and in either Kelly in Vegas, or we'll get another guest handicapper. I'll just do it myself for part number 3 this week, just because she's having, her dog Coco, which she tweeted out at Kelly in Vegas for any donations to the French Bulldog Humane Society. But Matt, I guess I got to ask you about the FCS, man. I know you know the FCS level very well. Did you kind of circle any games here? You brought up the Bethune-Cookman Miami game. Anything else you liking at the FCS level?
So we're looking at potentially the over for that Miami game. I talked about last week, I wanted Miami to lose the Texas A&M game, be angry, and then take it out on Bethune-Cookman. We've mentioned it. Miami's ruthless when it comes to these FCS games. They beat Bethune-Cookman 70-13 last year. They scored like 62 points on them a couple of years ago. I think they won 62-0 against Central Connecticut State a couple of years ago as well. If I get a mid-50s number. I'm looking at the over here. I mean, Miami, even if they don't try, should be able to score a bunch of points on Bethune-Cookman this season. They lost 56-14 to Memphis in week 1. I could see a similar score. So we'll see what that number is. It's probably going to end up being low 60s, and I'll end up passing. But if for some reason they put a mid-50s, I'll be interested in the over there. North Dakota, Boise State's an interesting game. Boise State obviously has not looked good so far this season. They won their FCS game 30-7 last year. North Dakota's 2-0. They got 8 offensive starters back, 7 defensive starters back. They lost to Nebraska last year 38-17, and it's a noon kickoff at Boise, Drew, which means if my math's correct, I think it's in Mountain Time Zone. That's a 10 a.m. start time. You might get a sleepy Boise start. So I might be interested in North Dakota or the over in that game because I think North Dakota is going to score some points. The other ones to kind of bring up real quick, Idaho, who just came off of a 33-6 win over Nevada last week. They get Cal in this game. Cal is coming off of a loss to Auburn at home. They've got Washington on the road. I don't think we're going to get a good number because Idaho just beat an FBS team. But if we get double digits potentially, I might be interested in the Vandals. And then, of course, the last game that I'll mention real quick is Villanova and UCF. UCF coming off that really good win at Boise State. They've got a road trip to Kansas State up next. Villanova is 2-0 so far this season. They've got a ton of starters back from last year. Some people will look at their 49-10 loss to Army last year and say, well, they're not going to be really good for an FBS game. I don't think I need them to be unless if this number's large, 28.5, 29, I don't think it will be, or the over is a reasonable number here. I think Villanova can score some points. I think UCF will score some points. So I think Villanova and the over is potentially live in the UCF game because UCF's got larger fish to fry next week at Kansas State.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, you bring up Boise State and UCF, both of them playing FCS school. They just played this past week. A great game. Went back and forth. And I noticed Boise State was wearing blue uniforms on the blue turf. I didn't think they were allowed to do that, but I guess that's only in conference play. Kind of, I felt like it was an advantage for Boise State, having that same color on the uniforms and in the ground. But UCF was still able to come out with the win. And in this game for the over, Gus Malzahn's one of those coaches where if he gets the kind of, like you brought up earlier, if he has the ability to run up the score, he will. So that could be another thing.
Yeah, and one more real quick. Tarleton State and Texas Tech. Texas Tech obviously coming off the heartbreaking loss, and the heartbreaking loss for people who had Texas Tech to cover in that game. They've got West Virginia on the road. Texas Tech won their FCS game 63-10 last year over Murray State. Tarleton State's 2-0 so far. The scores were 52-34 and 52-31. They lost to TCU 59-17 last year. If we get a low 60s number, I think I might take the over in that Texas Tech Tarleton State game because I think both teams will score. It could be a 59-20 type of game. So hoping for a low 60s number in that one.
Tarleton State. Do you know who they played off the top of your head? I almost feel like I'm picking up what you're laying down. I don't want to bet the under by any means, but sometimes like if you go from two really nobodies to a team like Texas Tech, your offense can look different. But no, I'm with you. That could be. Does that worry you at all?
It's McNeese State, who's not terrible, and then it's North Alabama, who's I believe a Division II team. So yes, but then if they are a lower level and still giving up 31 points to them, I'm just guessing. And look, there could be a hungover Texas Tech, and they may not score, but like. I think they will score. I think they'll be angry, and I think they'll take it out on Tarleton State. And once again, if I know correctly, I think Tarleton State's a quick offense, and if they go 3 and out quickly, that gives Texas Tech a lot of time, and obviously scoring 63 last year in their FCS game, coming off the tough loss, I think they won't pull back a little bit. They do start conference schedule next week, but I'm just saying, like, I think we could see a lot of points here. The problem is, if I know that there's going to be a lot of points here, Vegas knows. So I'm looking for a low 60s number here. Also, if you don't get in quick, the numbers are going to move because one large bet is going to move the number here. So I've seen that they're kind of come out a little bit around 10:30 Eastern time. I wish they would come out the night before, but we know that would never happen. But those are kind of my FCS looks. Can I give something else real quick, Drew?
Absolutely. More info, the better.
So JMU has Troy this week on the road. I don't think you've done this so far. I think maybe Rob Vino has this. I think it's in the next thing. Tuesday during the press conference that Kurt Signetti had, he talked about how his team had one of his worst practices in a while, and they just weren't focused. They came off the win over UVA, and he was very concerned about, that they wasted a day essentially on Tuesday. And he talks about how he watched the more film on Troy this offseason than he did about Virginia. Troy should have been their opponent in the Sun Belt Championship game last year. We know the NCAA stripped them of all that, saying JMU can't win the division. They can't make a bowl game. They can't make the conference championship game. So this game means a little bit more. But coming off the Virginia game, it's really interesting to know where this team's program is at. I'm actually interviewing Curt Cignetti on my show tomorrow to find out how the practices have been the last 2 days, Wednesday and then Thursday when I talk to him. So I'll be interested to see if things have gotten a little bit better, but I'm very concerned about where JMU's head is at. That was a huge win over Virginia in Charlottesville. If it doesn't get them this week, next week against Utah State, the third straight road game, I'm be very concerned there. But I'll be interested to see what Curt Cignetti talks about with me tomorrow on my show with regards to if the practices have gone better. Troy's really good, Drew. You got to focus in practice when it comes to that sort of thing. And then the other thing real quick, Tony Muskett was probably named the quarterback for UVA today. I think UVA emptied their emotional bucket last week against JMU. I think that weather delay just killed them. JMU scored the next 2 touchdowns after the weather delay. I worry, especially considering Maryland was down 14-0 to Charlotte in that first quarter. If we don't get a really good Terps effort early, I might look at Maryland first quarter, first half. I think Virginia comes out flat in this one after everything they put into last week. I like Maryland early in that game against the Hoos. That's a Friday night game, remember.
Okay. One thing I took away from watching that JMU Virginia game, which JMU won, unfortunately, for my bet, they did not cover. How about some of those calls, Matt? I mean, I know I'm speaking as a sports bettor, it kind of went against me, so I might be a little biased here, but I was surprised how many calls Virginia was getting. There was a big one on the goal line that didn't go JMU's way. It almost makes me pump the brakes on betting like a small market team like that up against a Power 5 team when the refs are, like an ACC ref type deal. I don't know. Do you ever think about that situation?
I try not to, because if you start thinking about all that stuff, like I know there's a lot of people who look at umpires when it comes to baseball, and I do somewhat, but I don't let it completely change my handicapping. I'll say this, and this, no one will ever admit this, but there, with everything that was happening, the ceremonies honoring the unfortunate passing of the 3 players and the emotion that was kind of surrounding there and the 50,000 in that stadium, Drew, like I can understand if they get a call or two, and JMU got through it. Like JMU's mentally tough, and now they've figured out their quarterback situation. They're going to be a bye team for me come Sunbelt season, but I was very concerned when I heard that their Tuesday practice wasn't very good. So I'll be eager to hear from the coach if it got better on Wednesday and Thursday, or if he's sitting here worried that his team's not going to be focused going into their Sunbelt opener coming up Saturday on the road in Troy on Saturday night.
At Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. Check out his radio show, ESPN Richmond. And he's off a 6-2 week. Check him out, sportsmemo.com. Matt, do you have a most confident play for us in the section? And any final thoughts here before we shut it down?
So it's tough because obviously last week we had a lot of winners in the section that we talked about, and we gave out the loser in the section. So I'll give you this. I like the over in the Iowa game. I'm going to wait, and hopefully it goes to 41.5. It's 42.5 right now. I still like it at 42.5. As we said, I think Iowa's going to use this situation. Heck, I see at 42 on DraftKings. So I like that. Because there's certainly the push situation here. I just think Western Michigan could go 3 and out a lot in quick situations. And at the end, when Iowa's, maybe their backups are in, I think Western Michigan can score here. So I like that. And then, as I said, Drew, and since this number's not out yet, we won't make this the official play, but the Virginia Tech team total under, if it's between like 14.5 and 16.5, I like that with all the injuries and the fact they couldn't score last year. Rutgers' defense is really good. So we're looking for a 14.5 to, well, actually, anything above 14.5 would be great when it comes to Virginia Tech here. I just don't think they're going to score. So there's kind of my 2 here, Drew, that I like the most in this situation.
Okay, giving us 2. And I guess for record-keeping purposes, we'll go with the number that's out, Iowa, in that over of 42. Kind of an ugly-looking over, but if it gets there, we'll take the wins. He's Matt Josephs at Mid-Major Matt on Twitter. I'm Drew Martin. Guys, that does it for half the Every Game on the Board podcast. We'll be back tomorrow, wherever you're downloading your podcast at. Every Game on the Board, Twitter, YouTube, Facebook as well. VivaTequilaSeltzer.com. Go check them out. Get it ordered to your house. Viva. Our belief is to live long, live well, and to live it up. Hashtag Viva Up. For Matt Josephs, I'm Drew Martin. Thanks for tuning in. Let us know you're listening in the comments below. Please smash that like button, and we will be back tomorrow finishing off the podcast. Thanks for tuning in. Cash those tickets.